So I was 14 when the pain started, 21 when I was first diagnosed, and somewhere in between, I lost count of the number of times in those 7 years where I was told, you're just having bad cramps. This is my endometriosis journey. Welcome to episode 6 of OMG, another podcast. Today we are talking all things endometriosis and my personal journey with that. So, as I've mentioned, I got my period pretty early when I was about I think it was 11, and I feel like that's early. I don't know about the standards now, but then I think you were supposed to start your period from around maybe 13, 14, and I got my period from the time I was 11 years old. So they were a bit irregular. They were kind of inconsequential, never really had any major hiccups. And then I got to high school and they became painful. And I remember just some of my friends from school, they're also going through the same pain, but not as much as I was, because I used to feel, symptoms like I was feeling dizzy. I was having like chronic fatigue. Like even if I decide to sleep like all Saturday and not do any extracurricular activities in school, I was in a boarding high school, I would still be very exhausted. And I used to wonder, what's wrong with me? Am I lazy? And then it started when I was in Form 2, where it became so painful. I was getting my periods every 2 weeks, and the flow was just so heavy. So I remember one time, the school just called my mom and told them to take me to hospital, and that was the beginning of what is now, at least it has a name, endometriosis. So the first time I visited a gynecologist. Like I mentioned, I was 14. I was in Form 2. I was with my mom, and the gynecologist told me that, but you are a growing teenager. That's just hormonal imbalance. And that's just, bad cramps. Everyone gets them. So I was like, okay, but, is there anything that can help? So no, not really. There isn't like necessarily anything that can help. And I was put on a lot of just painkillers. So I remember that day, the first doctor's visit, I was given, in fact, I was told to buy the pads that are for heavy flow, and I was given painkillers, and I came back to school. And I remember some teachers were like, really? After all that quote unquote dramatic, experience in terms of what you were going through, you came back with painkillers and, some sanitary towels. So I also felt very gaslit at that time. But you don't know that at that age. You're young. You don't necessarily know your body, but you just feel like something is off. So for me, like I mentioned, like my specific symptoms were the chronic fatigue, and the pain before I had my period and after I had my period, and also irregular menses, and also frequent menses. Fast forward, I believe a year later or two, it gets worse. And I continue bleeding, and sometimes in some months I don't get my period, and other months I get my period twice, so after every 2 weeks. And the story continues. And I remember again, my mother was called, and I think I was having dizzy spells, and all this whole time I'm in high school. So, another thing I forgot to mention is the first doctor probably also mentioned that it has something to do with the fact that I was in high school and stressed, and maybe I was in a high pressure situation. So I also thought that was the case. And yeah, I went through life. And like I mentioned, the second time my mom came for me when I was in high school. And again, we went back to the gynecologist. I can't really remember if we went to the same gynecologist or we went to a different gynecologist. But this time, I was given Femiplan. And that is, what do you call them? The pills to help you regulate your hormones. That's what the doctor said. And because my hormones were erratic, that's what I was told. And I was just like, it was so scary because I feel like I'm a kid. And how these drugs were presented to us then was they are for people who are sexually active, they're for people who are trying to not get pregnant, all those things. So I kind of felt very like I'm taking something quote unquote unholy, and there wasn't any more education. It was just like, oh, you're going through this, here these drugs, go take them, bye. So that's what I did. I was given the family plan, and I took those meds, I think, for 2 months, I believe. And in those 2 months, my period regulated, my mood felt better, I was not as tired. So I was like, oh, okay, this isn't too bad. But then everything came back later, like all the symptoms came like bulldozed their way back after the 2 months were up, obviously, because that was not a permanent solution. So this whole time, I still don't know what's wrong, still in pain. After the 2 months were up, actually was kind of tempted to like, to take those meds. And then I was encouraged again not to, because I'm still a growing teenager and it's normal. So I go through hell from the time I was in Form 2 until the time I leave high school. I joined university, still the same thing, but then became worse. And every time I had my period, sometimes I just had to go for an injection in hospital because painkillers are not working. Nothing was working. If it works, it works only for a few minutes. I was in so much pain that I would wake up breathing in pain in the middle of the night. So I remember I was speaking to my older sister about it, and I was telling her like, yo, I'm really suffering. I'm not okay, blah, blah, blah. And at that time she worked in insurance, and she was like, you know what? I know this really good gynecologist, and I think you need to go see them, just do proper tests, etc. Let me tell you. So finally, I went to this doctor, and this is Dr. Ngayo. Love Dr. Ngayo. And for the first time, someone conducted tests on me. So imagine this all these years. Now, this is when I was 21 years old. So for 7 years, I've been saying that I've been in pain. I've been put on family plan. It is normal. I've been told it's just hormonal imbalance. I'm a growing young lady, etc. And no one ever took the time to do any tests. So here we are. I'm in Dr. Ngai's clinic, never met him before. This was my first time. I literally stayed there, they're doing blood work, they're doing scans, all these things. And I was just like, okay, this is a bit dramatic, because I was expecting the same thing. Come here, get my 2 dawas, I go home. And so they did the scans. I remember they did a transvaginal scan. They took up some blood work just to see how my blood is doing, and if I'm good. And then it was finally time to see the doctor when the results were out. And again, I was very much my bubbly self. I was like, yeah, doc, this thing. So I started telling him my history, for the past 7 years. And he's like, no, but, we suspect that you have a form of endometriosis called adenomyosis, where the endometriosis is now within the linings of your uterus. And I was like, sorry, what? And they're saying like, the mass is so big that we need to, really operate very soon because of the quality of your life. And we don't want it to spread. And I'm like, again, sorry, what? I was coming here for 2 pills, and then I go home. And then now you're telling me about surgery, blah, blah, blah. Like, I was floored. I was shocked. I can't imagine. I'm just looking back to myself 21 years ago, and I counted, and that's when I was diagnosed. That's 11 years ago. And then, it was a lot. And I remember just being so stunned about being told that, we need to go into surgery, we need to operate on you, and then also to confirm. So now this is when I started doing my research and understanding what this thing is with such a long name is about. And I never necessarily heard about it. And I just wondered, why? And why do you even need surgery for it? For you to quote unquote confirm that this is the condition that you have. So I was overwhelmed. I remember just leaving the doctor's office so defeated. Remember, it was like around 6 p.m. Thank goodness my older sister was still around and she worked just around the corner. So when I got the results, I told her about it and she came for me and we went for coffee and, afterwards. And she was like, how are you feeling? And I'm like, this is a lot. But I was numb. And then I was also kind of relieved and glad that for the first time, what I was experiencing or had been experiencing for the past 7 years now has a name. And there is something that we're doing about it, but the doing about it is not just being prescribed for medicine for like a week, it's now surgery. And a laparoscopic surgery. Thank goodness that we didn't have to do like, the open one, but it doesn't make it better. It's still surgery. So I go home with my envelopes and my test results, and again I was anemic because I was losing so much blood. And I went home to tell my family, obviously, and my parents specifically, because now their daughter is going to be undergoing surgery and now everything has a name. I remember it was just such a shock. I remember my younger sister like bursting out in tears, like, what do you mean, like this is so much? My mom just also like crying, like, what does this mean? My dad was in so much shock, and he just kept on asking questions like, do we need a second opinion? No, we don't need to go for surgery. And I was just like, no, but this is it. And I remember, I think we went for a second opinion to another gynecologist and the results were conclusive. So at 21 years old, feels also just kind of, I feel like in a way as well, I have locked away those memories a lot because of how traumatic it was. You've just come from knowing you're in pain to this thing possibly having a name, and then now you have to go through surgery to kind of confirm what the condition truly is. And that was just a lot. So I remember I was still in the middle of my semester. It was the final semester of the year, and it was in November, and I had to now inform my lecturers about, I'm not going to even be able to do the final exam. So all of them were just very encouraging, and they told me just do all your assignments, make sure you just finish everything, and then like when you come back the next semester, you'll just come and do the exam, but at least you'll have finished your coursework. So I did that, and I remember just feeling like, what do you mean life is supposed to continue like nothing happened? What do you mean like I'm just supposed to move on? Like I've just not been told life altering news. And then that time there wasn't like, people like the late Njambi, Kwekai talking about it. There weren't many people online speaking about it. There were not many resources speaking about it. So even like the kind of information you find online was so gruesome. I remember trying to do research, and I remember some of the things I was seeing is like, now you're infertile, now you may even lose your ovaries, or if they decide to operate on you, they may have to remove their whole uterus or all your ovaries. And it was just so jarring and so scary. And I just felt so alone. And I just remember thinking like, what the hell is this? So I go through with the surgery, and they remove the masses, and now I get another piece of shocking information that I'm going to be placed on, was it 3 to 6 months? No, I remember just 6 months. 6 months of medication where it's literally forcing my body to go into menopause to let my uterus heal. Again, just being pumped with injections. I remember it was so costly. I think it was like 15 to 20,000 per month. Going there to the doctor, being injected. I don't want to say the name of the medicine just because of obviously just pharmaceutical reasons and things like that. But I remember it was hormonal treatment to make sure that my body goes into menopause to help heal my uterus so that I don't also ovulate and have a period. When I tell you that is one of the worst things I have ever gone through in life, forcing a 21-year-old body to forcefully go into, to go into menopause. I even just found myself blanked out because I just remember that period of time in my life. And the hot flash, like, and then now you think you're just in menopause no, you get all the symptoms, the hot flashes, the mood swings, the depressive episode, it was terrible. And I remember I got to like month 4 and I told my doctor, nah, I can't do this anymore. There has to be an alternative. There has to be an alternative. So I was put on the pill, which I took for years so that I don't necessarily have a period. Or if I choose to, I can just, break it, have a period and, but I just remember being in so much pain. I was like, yeah, I'm going to take the medicine. And you don't think that that thing does something to you psychologically, but it did. And I feel like it kind of broke something into me. And these, when you go through surgery, your body is never the same. I feel like, especially like my even my bowel system, I don't feel like it was the same after that. So the journey continued, and I now started doing research. I started to find resources or communities of people who have this thing, especially in Kenya, and what does this mean? And so I realized some of the things that affect our bodies is like our diet. So, for example, I stay away from things like, any inflammatory foods, anything that can inflame my body. Like gluten is not the best. I'm not best friends with that. I'm also lactose intolerant, so I don't take milk. Also, for me, I need to work out, not necessarily because I'm losing weight, but my body requires it. And I can't do high intensity workouts because that makes your body inflamed. So basically, endometriosis is like an inflammatory condition, and people categorize it as a reproductive health issue, but it's mostly an inflammatory and also hormone based condition. And I think what pains me the most is that there's such little research that has gone into this condition to just also educate people on the treatment or how to manage it. And the worst part is, actually, I forgot to say this, is that endometriosis has no known cause and no known cure. So you can't wake up and say that, oh, I'm going to drink this and this and this. You manage it. And I remember that I think that was just the depression and just the feeling defeated when I got the diagnosis of like, now this is something I'm going to live with for life. So I went through life, shalala, all was well. And a few years later, I believe it was 4 years later, I started feeling the same pain again, but this time on my left side. And I knew, my body just knew that something is not right. So again, took myself to the doctor because at least now I'm in a better place and I know my body better. And they found the endometriosis on my left ovary. And it was painful and it was enlarged. So again, what does this mean? Being wheeled into surgery again. I remember feeling so defeated. That was such a dark time in my life because I was like, no, this can't be my life, where every few years it comes back. And that's also another thing that they don't tell you, or you don't know in the beginning when you're diagnosed, that it does come back or it can come back. And especially it can attach itself to any surface. So endometriosis basically is when the material that is similar to the uterine wall grows outside of that. So the first time, like I said, it was adenomyosis, which was a form of endometriosis that was another added layer inside my uterine wall. And then now the second diagnosis was the endo on my left ovary. So it had to be removed because it was causing so much discomfort, pain. In fact, I was even swelling on that side. And also the bleeding, again, was just off the charts. So at this point, I just feel like I'd almost like given up. And I was wheeled into surgery. And it also talks about the healing process because you're in pain. And then you have to be bedridden and you have to eat all these foods. It just feels like your life stops for a while and you're in pain and you just feel like this will never stop or ever end. So I went for that surgery. And then it was in February, I believe, of 2015. That was the second one. And it was just, yeah, it wasn't fun. And a few months later, I remember my stomach was also in so much pain, and I was wondering to myself, like, okay, what's going on? What's the issue here? And I went back to my doctor and he's like, no, your reproductive organs are okay. Like, why are you saying you're feeling the pain? I said, no, it's actually in my actual stomach. And then he recommended me to a gastroenterologist. Goes to the gastroenterologist only to find out that I have a fissure, which is like a leak in my large intestine that was caused by, again, endo present there. And let me tell you, I remember going back home and just breaking down and telling my mom that I want to quit life. I want to quit my job because at that time I was working. I want to quit my job. I had just returned to work, I believe, after 6 weeks of being away. And I was just like, no, I think I wanna quit life. So thankfully for that, we didn't have to go necessarily through surgery, but I remember they did conduct a colonoscopy, and that's how they were able to detect the fissure. And I went through that, and then again I was put on the pill so that my reproductive system, my hormonal system, just my internal system can heal. But at this time I feel like I was broken. And I feel like my family and my friends really held me together. And but then I remember just sitting there one day and I was like, is this really life? No, this can't be my life. And I chose to fight. And also at the same time is when I found the Endometriosis Foundation of Kenya, which was founded by my good friend Elsie Wandera, and just a community of women who spoke about the condition, who have lived with it. Some of them are much older than I was, some of them were younger than I was, and I joined the organization. I started volunteering. It's an NGO, especially in the advocacy of the welfare of women, especially living with endometriosis, and just policy. And so I was really drawn to that kind of organization, and it made it feel less helpless for me. So quick facts: March is Endometriosis Awareness Month, and then I believe April is Adenomyosis Awareness Month. And there are organizations, especially if you're in Kenya and you are struggling with this condition and you don't know where to get resources, please reach out to the Endometriosis Foundation of Kenya. I know there's also another one called Endo Sisters as well. And thankfully now there are resources and you can do a lot of research online just to understand about this condition. But we are such a long way to go. And I think even with sharing this story, I was just kind of asking myself, like, what's the light at the end of the tunnel, or what's the take home? I think the take home is like, there's just a lot to be done. There's just so much research that needs to go to in understanding women's bodies, and you know and making sure that someone is whole. Because, for example, like I mentioned, endometriosis can grow anywhere. Like, for example, again, with the late Njambi, she had endometriosis in her lungs. It can even go to your brain. It can even go to your eye membrane. So I think calling it a reproductive health issue is not the right way to go about it. It is just a physiological condition that needs further research. But please don't feel like you're alone. And another thing that I've also learned through this process is, don't gaslight yourself. You know your body. You live with your body. So if something feels off, then it's off. Painful periods are not normal. Overbleeding is not normal. Missing your period this month, getting it next month is not normal. Having hormonal imbalance is not normal. And if you have any of these symptoms or you suspect it, please make sure you go and visit your doctor, and a good gynecologist. And they're just people they're also gynecologists who are not empathetic, and you also have to be careful with that. Like I told you, the first gynecologist I went to did gaslight me and tell me that it's just normal, it's hormone imbalance, you're just a growing young lady, blah blah blah. But please find someone or a gynecologist who also has experience with this, who is empathetic, who won't gaslight you and will listen to you. So I just wanted to say that you're not alone as women. In terms of where I'm at with my journey, for some reason, I don't know what I did. I think it's the things that I've mentioned, like just checking my diet, working out, and I'm in a better place and I'm not suffering as much as I was. And actually another thing, because of this hormonal imbalance, I was in my teens. I also had hormonal cystic acne, like really bad acne, the one that you get boils on your face, and that's why I have some scarring on my cheeks. So I just wanted to say that your pain is real. You're not alone. You deserve care. You deserve good health care. And I think this is just a topic that is so close to my heart and I want to speak more about. I'll probably have someone else come speak this with me, either, my doctor or just another endo sister, another endo warrior. Actually, that's what we call ourselves, endo warrior, to speak more on this and shed a bit more light. But just know that you're not alone and your pain is valid. So yeah. Thank you for listening to this episode. It's been very vulnerable. I feel like I don't know. I don't feel like I've shared everything. There's just so much to unpack there, from a mental health perspective, how it affects you, from your physical body, to also just normal functions. Because I know there are women who have had to go through, like, hysterectomies where their uterus had to be removed. Others have lost their ovaries. That means, like, if you wanted to have children, you're not able to do that. And it's just crazy. And they don't tell you that if you go through such major procedures, that you have to go also through hormonal therapy to replace the fact that your body can produce those hormones, which are also needed for other functions in the body. So there's just quite a lot to unpack there. And this is a conversation that I'll I'll revisit. But I just wanted to remind you again, like, your pain is valid, and always trust your gut and your body. Thank you for being here. Make sure you share this with someone who is going through something similar. You do know that, and please go and see a doctor. Till next time.